When we think of ancient philosophy, we often think of comfort. We think of the Stoics teaching us how to endure. We think of Plato pointing us toward a higher truth. We think of Aristotle giving us a blueprint for the good life. The modern world is filled with books and videos that package this wisdom, that offer philosophy to help you fall asleep. They present these ancient thinkers as a source of calm, as a way to find meaning in our chaotic, modern lives. But this is only half the story. It is the safe story. It is the comforting lie we tell ourselves about the past. What if the real lessons from the ancient world were not meant to comfort you, but to shatter your most basic beliefs? What if the most brilliant minds in history did not just seek meaning, but were the first to discover that there is no meaning to be found? What if everything you believe about reality, about your own mind, about morality, and about the gods is a fragile story you have inherited, and the proof of that has been sitting in fragments, buried for 2,000 years? This is not a video about Stoicism. This is not about finding peace. This is about the ideas that were so dangerous, so unsettling, that history has tried to forget them. We are here to uncover the darkest, most disturbing, and most terrifyingly modern theories from the ancient world. We will explore the philosophies that argue that certainty is impossible, that life is a trap, and that the universe is fundamentally, terrifyingly silent. Many of us feel this today. We feel a deep, unspoken anxiety that something is fundamentally wrong with the world, that everything we know is a lie. We feel that the very fact of our own consciousness is literally the actual scariest thing that can possibly happen. And for centuries, we have been told that this feeling is madness, that it is a delusion. The most disturbing realization of all is this: you are not alone. The greatest minds of the ancient world felt this dread too. They stared directly into the void, and they wrote down exactly what they saw. The first theory, the world eraser. Gorgias and the three-part void. Imagine a man who, in a single speech, proved with perfect, devastating logic that you do not exist, that the world around you does not exist, and that even if it did, you could never, ever tell anyone about it. His name was Gorgias of Lantini, and he was a master of the sophists, the intellectual rock stars and rhetorical bad boys of ancient Greece. He lived in an age of profound philosophical war. On one side was a man named Parmenides, the father of the Eleatic school. Parmenides had argued, with pure, uncompromising reason, that all of reality, what he called being, is a single, unchanging, eternal, and motionless whole. He argued that all change, all motion, all the variety we see in the world is just an illusion. His unbreakable slogan was, "What is, is. What is not. You cannot," he argued, even think of nothing, because to think of it, it would have to be something. This argument, while bizarre, was a logical fortress. It had trapped Greek philosophy. And then Gorgias arrived. He did not just attack the fortress. He turned it inside out and reduced it to rubble. In his legendary and terrifying treatise, On the Non-Existent or On Nature, Gorgias did not set out to build a new philosophy. He set out to destroy philosophy itself. He used his opponent's own sacred tool, pure logic, to prove three sequential, horrifying propositions. The first proposition: nothing exists. Gorgias took Parmenides' own rules and used them like a weapon. He begins, "All right, let us assume something does exist. What would it be?" He systematically proves that the very concept of existence is a logical contradiction. He shows that being cannot be eternal, because then it would be limitless. And if it is limitless, it is nowhere. And if it is nowhere, it does not exist. He shows it cannot be created, because what could it be created from? It cannot be created from being, because that would mean being already existed. And it cannot be created from not being, from nothing, because, as Parmenides himself proved, nothing cannot create anything. He traps them. He shows, with their own logic, that being cannot be one or many. It cannot be eternal or created. It cannot be. The very concept is an absurdity. With one stroke, he logically deletes the entire universe. But he was just getting started. The second proposition, even if anything did exist, it could not be known. Here, Gorgias severs the connection between your mind and the world. He attacks the foundational belief of all philosophy, that what we think has any relationship to what is real. His argument is devastatingly simple. He points out that you can think of things that are clearly not real. You can, for example, think of a chariot flying in the sea. You can think of a man with wings. The fact that you can think it does not mean it exists. So, if we can think of things that are not real, how can we ever trust that the things we do think are real? How do you know that your thoughts are not all just flying chariots? You cannot. He proves that thought and reality are two separate, sealed domains. Your mind is a box, and there is no way to know if there is anything at all on the outside. This leads him to his final and most terrifying conclusion. The third proposition, even if it could be known, it could not be communicated. This is the argument that locks the door and throws away the key. Gorgias argues that the tools we use to communicate our logos, our speech, are not the things themselves. Think about it. When you want to communicate the idea of green to me, what do? You say the word green, but the word green is not the experience of the color green. The word is a sound, a collection of letters. The color is a perception, a quality. How can you ever prove that what you experience as green is what I experience as green? You cannot. You cannot export your subjective perception from your mind and import it into mine. We are all just trading these dead tokens, these words, and desperately hoping that the experience on the other side is the same. But we will never, ever know. That is the cold, quiet punch of Gorgias's philosophy. It is not just a clever word game. It is the first and most complete blueprint for nihilism, the belief that nothing can be known or communicated. Gorgias did not just doubt reality. He logically disproved it. He proved that metaphysics is impossible, that epistemology is a fantasy, and that communication is a delusion. And that is why this story is still so horrifying. It is not horror because of its nihilism. It is horror because it is the original and most profound problem of other minds. It is the root of solipsism. We are right now, just as the American psychoscript says, screaming into a void where no one sees anyone else. We all share that same deep, primal fear, the fear that we are totally and completely alone in our own minds, the fear that our consciousness is a sealed box. Gorgias is the philosopher who did not just ask if we were trapped. He proved, with cold, indifferent logic, that we are. The second theory, the silent heavens, Epicurus and the indifferent gods. The Charvaka said, there are no gods. They cleared the heavens, leaving only a material void. But from ancient Greece, another philosopher, Epicurus, offers a far more chilling, and for many, a far more disturbing possibility. What if the truth is worse? What if the gods are real, and they are just ignoring us? Epicurus, like the Charvaka, has been slandered by history. We hear the word Epicurean, and we think of gluttony, indulgence, and a reckless pursuit of pleasure. This is a gross misrepresentation, a smear campaign run by his philosophical rivals. Epicurus was not a hedonist. He was a doctor for the human soul. His entire philosophy was designed to cure us of the one disease he believed was the root of all human misery, anxiety. His goal was not pleasure, but ataraxia, state of perfect, undisturbed tranquility, a life free from all physical pain and, most importantly, all mental disturbance. He diagnosed the two great sicknesses of the human mind, the two primary sources of all our dread. We fear death, and we fear the gods. His cure for both was a form of radical materialism. Like Democritus before him, Epicurus was an atomist. He argued that everything in the universe, from rocks to sunlight to our own consciousness, is just a temporary arrangement of tiny, indivisible particles called atoms. First, he set out to cure the fear of death. If the soul, like the body, is just a collection of atoms, then when the body dies, the soul atoms simply disperse. There is no afterlife. There is no immortal soul to survive and face punishment in hell. There is no sensation at all. From this, he draws his most famous comforting conclusion. Death is nothing to us. When we are, death is not. When death is, we are not. It is an empty desire to wish for immortality. Since death is just the absence of sensation, it cannot be harmful. Therefore, to fear it is irrational. One part of our anxiety is cured, but then he turns to the gods. And this is where his philosophy takes its dark, unsettling turn. Epicurus does not deny the gods. In fact, he says it is manifestly clear that they exist. He argues that they too are made of atoms, but they are perfect, immortal, and exist in a state of ultimate, perfect bliss. They are the ultimate ideal of ataraxia. But here, he has created a logical trap. For the gods to be perfectly blissful, they must be perfectly undisturbed. And what is the single most disturbing, chaotic, and stressful thing in the entire cosmos? U.S. humanity, with our wars, our suffering, our petty desires, and our endless, whining, contradictory prayers. Therefore, Epicurus concludes, for the gods to remain gods, they must be indifferent. They would not have any special affection for human beings. They do not imagine that they concern themselves about human beings and their behavior. They are not angry with us. They do not love us. They do not hear us. They simply ... are perfect, blissful, and totally, completely silent. This brings us to the famous Epicurean paradox, the most concise and brutal formulation of the problem of evil ever penned. The logic goes like this. Is God willing to prevent evil, but not able? Then he is not all-powerful. Is he able to prevent evil, but not willing? Then he is not all good. Is he both able and willing? Then why does evil exist? Christian theologians like Augustine would later wrestle with this, arguing for a greater good or a divine, mysterious plan. But Epicurus's philosophy provides the cold, clean, and terrifying answer. The gods are able, but unwilling, not because they are evil, but because they are indifferent. They are too busy enjoying their own perfect peace to be bothered with the suffering of mortals. That is the real disturbing truth of Epicureanism. It is not atheism. It is cosmic indifference. This idea is, for many, psychologically harder to bear than either traditional religion or pure atheism. The Charvaka's atheism, at least, offers the cold comfort of an empty house. Traditional theism offers the comfort or terror of a parent who is actively involved, who has a plan, who cares. Epicureanism is the worst of all possible worlds. It is the realization that the parents are home, but they have locked their bedroom door. They can hear you screaming, but they are choosing to ignore you because your suffering is a distraction from their own happiness. Epicurus called this good news. He called it a cosmic insignificance therapy. By realizing the gods do not care, we are cured of our fear of them. We are free. But this is the peace of the orphan. It is the peace of finally, truly giving up. It is the horrifying realization that we are utterly and completely alone in a populated and silent universe. The third theory, the gilded cage. Plato's noble lie. If the gods are silent and indifferent, then we are left to govern ourselves. The burden of creating order falls entirely on human shoulders. But what if that order, the very foundation of a just society, can only be built on a lie? This is the dark, political secret hidden at the heart of the most famous philosophical text in history, Plato's Republic. This text is the foundation of Western thought. It is Plato's grand, utopian attempt to design Callipolis, the ideal, perfectly just city. But as he builds this city in his mind, he runs into a profound and very human problem. His just city requires a rigid, permanent, and non-negotiable social hierarchy. The city must be divided into three classes, and only three classes. First, there are the rulers, the philosopher kings. They are the brains of the city. In their souls, Plato says, God has mixed gold. Second, there are the auxiliaries, the warriors and guardians. They are the spirit and the muscle of the city. In their souls, God has mixed silver. And third, there are the producers, the farmers, craftsmen, and merchants. They are the appetites of the city. In their souls, God has mixed bronze and iron. In Plato's perfect city, justice means that every person does the one job for which they are naturally suited, and they never cross into the territory of another class. But how do you make this work? How do you get the massive bronze class to accept their fate, to work their entire lives to support the classes above them, and never question it? How do you prevent them from becoming envious, from rioting, from tearing the just city apart? And even more difficult, what happens when a gold parent, one of the rulers, has a child who is clearly bronze? Plato is ruthless on this point. He demands that the parent shall by no means give way to pity, but must thrust them out among the artisans or the famers. How could any human society function this way? Plato, speaking through his master Socrates, proposes a solution. To create this perfect city, the rulers must invent and propagate one grand foundational myth, a single, powerful piece of state-controlled fiction. He calls it the Genaian pseudos, the noble lie. The rulers, he says, must tell all citizens this story. They must teach it to the children until it becomes unquestioned fact. The story is this: you are all brothers, born from the earth. But when God fashioned you, he mixed different metals into your souls. He put gold in some, silver in others, and bronze and iron in the rest. And an oracle has foretold that the state shall be overthrown when the man of iron or brass is its guardian. This is your nature. This is the will of God. Socrates and Plato know this is a lie, but they justify it. Plato makes a critical and terrifying distinction. He says there is a true lie, which is ignorance in the soul, and which is always evil. But then there is the lie in words. This kind of lie, he argues, can be used as a medicine, as a form of paternalism. The noble lie is a lie in words that the rulers, like doctors, must use to cure the city and maintain social harmony. The goal, Plato argues, is making them more inclined to care for the state and one another. This is the cold, quiet punch of the Republic. This is the philosophical birth of state propaganda. The disturbing theory at the heart of Plato's utopia is that truth and justice are not compatible. To build a stable, harmonious, and just society, the rulers must hide the truth from the people. They must protect the masses from what one commentator calls deadly truths. And this reveals the ultimate, cynical philosopher's privilege. Plato is the man who gave us the allegory of the cave. He is the man who told us that philosophy is the painful, blinding journey out of the cave, away from the flickering shadows on the wall, and into the true light of the good. And yet, in the Republic, when it comes time to build his own city, what is the very first thing he does? He builds a new cave. He invents a new set of shadows. He consciously creates a civic rhetorical device to test and control the population. This is the original sin of political philosophy. It is the moment the quest for truth becomes a tool for control. It creates a two-tiered reality that has defined politics ever since. The enlightened few, who know the truth of the lie, and the deluded, happy masses who must believe it. This is the dark pattern that would justify authoritarianism, propaganda, and paternalistic control for the next 2,000 years. The fourth theory, the iron hand, Han Fei and the legalist machine. Plato argued that a perfect society must be built on a noble lie. He believed that people could be conditioned, through this medicinal deception, to accept their place for the greater good. But from the bloody, chaotic battlefields of ancient China, a philosopher named Han Fei would look at Plato's idea and laugh. He would call it naive, sentimental, and dangerously weak. To control humanity, Han Fei argued, you do not need lies. Lies are too fragile. To control humanity, you need iron. We now travel to the Warring States period from 453 to 221 BCE. This was not a time for philosophical debate. This was an age of total war, of constant, brutal, interstate competition. The old codes of honor were dead. The moral philosophy of Confucius, with its emphasis on benevolence, virtue, and moral example, was seen as a dangerous fantasy. Telling a king to be virtuous when his neighbors were sharpening their swords was a path to annihilation. Into this chaos stepped Han Fei, the greatest and most terrifying synthesizer of the Fa-Jia, or the legalist school. Han Fei's philosophy is one of pure, cold, and absolute political realism. It begins, as all political philosophies must, with a view of human nature. For Han Fei, this was simple. Humans are not good. They are inherently selfish. They do not care about virtue, benevolence, or the good of the state. They are covetous of riches and fame. Every single person, from the lowest peasant to the highest minister, is driven only by self-interest. The goal of the state, therefore, is not to make people good. That is impossible. The goal of the state is a rich state and a powerful army to survive and conquer. So, how does a ruler control a population of inherently selfish, greedy, and untrustworthy people? Han Fei argued that the ruler must reject all Confucian morality. He must abandon mercy and generosity. He must trust no one. He should not even trust his own abilities or intervene in political processes. The ruler, in fact, should be a mediocrity. Instead, the ruler must become a cold, impersonal operator of an infallible machine. This machine, he argued, runs on two things and two things only. He called them the two handles. The first handle is punishment. The law, the Fa, must be absolute, public, and unavoidable. It must be applied to everyone equally, with no distinction between kin and stranger. And the punishments must be harsh. Han Fei argued that you must inflict corporal punishment even on closest kin. The goal is to make the punishment for even a minor infraction so severe that the people are terrified of the law. They will obey not out of respect, but out of fear. The second handle is reward. The state should channel the people's selfish interests into the only two pursuits that benefit the state: agriculture and warfare. Do you want riches and fame? You will not find them in art or philosophy or merchant activity. You will only find them by growing food for the army or by taking heads on the battlefield. This is the legalist machine. It is a system unconcerned with individual morality. It is a system that assumes all human beings are selfish and covetous and uses that selfishness as its fuel. It is a system that rejects teaching and benevolence and relies only on impersonal laws, strict control, and absolute fear. Han Fei even advocated for state control over all private learning, insisting that the Sidig, law is the teaching, and officials are the teachers. Here is the cold, quiet punch of legalism. It worked. This philosophy, in all its brutal efficiency, was the exact blueprint adopted by the state of Qin. It was the Qin state that, in 221 BCE, conquered all its rivals and forged the first unified Chinese empire. And for the next 2,000 years, a dark secret was kept. While Chinese emperors ruled publicly with the gentle, moral language of Confucianism, They ruled privately with the iron, efficient, and brutal mechanics of Han Fei's legalism. That is the disturbing theory of the legalists. It is the philosophy of pure, unadulterated totalitarianism. It is the belief that humanity is not a community, but a problem to be managed. It is a world where trust is impossible, an irresolvable power struggle between the ruler and the members of his entourage. Mercy is weakness, and fear is the only true motivator. This is the dark endgame of Plato's noble lie. Plato's system relies on the lie working. It needs the people to believe they are bronze. Han Fei's system is post-truth. It assumes all lies will fail. It assumes the bronze people will always be selfish. Therefore, legalism does not care what you believe. It only cares what you do. It is the disturbing, pragmatic, and anti-ministerial truth that when survival is on the line, nice philosophies are a luxury. And the only thing that works is a machine built on the very worst parts of human nature. The fifth theory, the human animal. Diogenes the cynic, we have seen philosophies that control the heavens, and philosophies that control the state. But now we turn to a philosophy that terrorizes the state by attacking the one thing that holds it together, shame. We all laugh at the man who lived in a barrel. We share the stories of Diogenes of Sinope as if he were a clever internet troll, a rebel, and a vagabond. We love the story of him heckling Plato, and the story of him telling Alexander the Great to move. We are missing the horror of his point. Diogenes was not a witty contrarian. He was a terrorist of human convention. His philosophy was not a set of doctrines. It was a practical philosophy of action, a performance art assault on culture. His story begins with an act of destruction. He was born in Sinope, the son of a wealthy man who minted coins for a living. Diogenes, in an act of rebellion, effaced the currency and was banished from the city, exiled as a penniless wanderer. He then spent the rest of his life defacing the social currency of all Greece. He was called Kynikos, the dog-like man. He did not reject the label. He embraced it. He looked at the dogs in the street and saw that they were more free, more honest, and lived a more natural life than the most powerful men in Athens. His entire philosophy was built on two principles, ascesis, or a life of extreme austerity, and anaideia, a life of total, radical shamelessness. He made a virtue of poverty. He begged for a living. He rejected all property. He famously lived in a large ceramic jar, or pithos, in the marketplace. He once saw a child drinking water from his cupped hands. Diogenes, realizing he was still a slave to things, immediately threw away his own wooden cup, saying, "A child has beaten me in plainness of living." But his austerity was not the scary part. His shamelessness was. Diogenes argued that human beings had become sick, corrupt, and confused. We had abandoned physis, or nature, for nomos, or convention. We had built an artificial cage of rules, rituals, and manners, and we had willingly locked ourselves inside it. His mission was to show everyone the cage. He would perform all bodily functions in public. He ate in the marketplace, which was a profound taboo, explaining simply that he felt hungry in the marketplace. He would relieve himself in public. He was scandalous in his indecent behavior, to which he famously replied that he wished it were as easy to relieve hunger by rubbing an empty stomach. His argument was devastatingly simple. If an act is not naturally shameful in private, it is not made shameful by being performed in public. The shame you feel is not natural. It is taught. It is the bar of the cage. This is the context for his most famous philosophical stunts. They were not jokes. They were physical attacks on abstraction. We all know the story. Plato, in his Academy, was applauded for his new definition. Man is a biped, featherless animal. Diogenes plucked a chicken, stormed into the lecture hall, and threw it at Plato's feet, shouting, "Here is Plato's man." Plato's school, humiliated, was forced to add the qualifier, having broad nails. This was not a joke. This was a physical refutation of Plato's entire world of forms. Plato was building abstract castles in the sky. Diogenes was rubbing his nose in the dirt. He was saying, your truth in your head is a joke. Here is the real truth, in the real world. It is messy, it is ugly, and it is featherless. Plato himself, when asked what sort of man Diogenes was, reportedly replied, a Socrates gone mad. And then there is the most famous encounter of all. Alexander the Great, the most powerful man in the known world, conqueror of nations, a living god, heard of this strange dog man and came to Corinth to see him. He found Diogenes sunbathing. Alexander, surrounded by his generals, stood over this homeless man in a jar and said, I am Alexander the Great. Ask of me any favor you wish. Diogenes did not even sit up. He squinted into the sun and replied, stand out of my light. The generals were horrified. They expected Alexander to have the man killed. Instead, Alexander was silent for a moment. Then he turned to his men and said the words that cemented the punch of this philosophy. If I were not Alexander, I should have liked to be Diogenes. That is the cold, quiet punch of cynicism. Why would he say that? Because Alexander, the man who had conquered the entire world, recognized in that moment that he was a slave. He was a slave to his ambition, his wealth, his power, his desire. Diogenes, who owned nothing, was a slave to nothing. He had achieved true autarkia, or self-sufficiency. He had, by opposing nature to convention, become the only truly free man in all of Greece. The disturbing theory of Diogenes is that all of human civilization is the cage. Our hygiene, our laws, our family, our politics, our privacy, and most of all, our shame is just an artificial, pathetic, and confused set of rules that keep us from living in accord with nature. We are just animals. We are all just plucked chickens. And the profound shame we feel when we watch Diogenes is his entire point. The sixth theory, the father of war, Heraclitus and cosmic strife, we have come to our final, and perhaps most profound, disturbing theory. We have seen the void of logic, the void of materialism, and the void of the silent heavens. We have seen the social cages of lies, the iron cages of law, and the animal freedom of shamelessness. But our final idea, from the weeping philosopher Heraclitus of Ephesus, argues that all of this is part of a single, eternal, and terrifying whole. We think we know Heraclitus. We know him as the philosopher of flux, the man who famously said, you cannot step in the same river twice. We have tamed this philosophy. We interpret it as a kind of gentle, flowing, go-with-the-flow worldview. We have forgotten, or deliberately ignored, his other thesis, the one that underpins everything he ever said. We, as humans, seek harmony. We pray for peace. We desire an end to strife. Plato tried to build a city without strife. Epicurus sought a life without disturbance. Heraclitus argues that this desire itself is a prayer for the death of the universe. For Heraclitus, the underlying principle of the cosmos, the logos, is not peace. It is not stability. It is flux, it is fire, and it is opposition. Reality, he argued, is a unity of opposites. He then delivers his most famous, most brutal, and most misunderstood fragment. Fragment 53. War, he wrote, is the father of all and king of all. And some he has shown as gods, others men. Some he has made slaves, others free. He did not mean this as a lament. He did not mean this as a political or military observation. He meant this as a metaphysical law. This was not a state of nature, as Hobbes would later argue. This was the state of the cosmos. To prove it, he wrote another, even more explicit fragment. Fragment 80. We must recognize, he said, that war is common, strife is justice, and all things happen according to strife and necessity. strife is justice. His logic is brutal and undeniable. We only know up because of down. We only know good because of bad. We only know life because of death. We only know harmony because of dissonance. The tension between these opposites is not an accident. It is the engine of reality. It is the conflicting powers that make possible the world and all its variety. Therefore, Heraclitus argues, a universe without conflict, without war, without strife, would be a lifeless uniformity. It would be a harmony of one single unchanging note. It would be nothing. This is why he criticized those who prayed for an end to strife. He said they were praying for the end of the universe. That is the cold, quiet punch of Heraclitus. This is the ultimate dark philosophy. As the blood meridian script says, war is God. Heraclitus, 2.5 millennia earlier, literally argued that war is father ... and king. The disturbing truth is that there is no end goal. There is no final ataraxia. There is no Callipolis. There is no heaven. There is no liberation. There is only the battle. The struggle is the point. Your life is not meant to be peaceful. It is meant to be a struggle. And that struggle, that war, is the entire, beautiful, and terrifying point of your existence. This is the ultimate refutation of all utopianism. Plato and Han Fei tried to end strife. Plato tried to lie it away. Han Fei tried to beat it away. Both sought control and stability. Heraclitus looked at their attempts and saw them as unnatural and impossible. Strife is cosmic justice. This is the most profound and disturbing political and personal idea of all. It means all our attempts at progress, peace, or a perfect society are just one side of the eternal war. The Logos does not care which side wins. It only cares that the battle continues. The war uses our desire for peace to fuel more war. It is an ancient, poetic, and merciless worldview that, like Judge Holden, will never die. And in the end, that is the cold, quiet punch of ancient philosophy. It is not horror because these ideas are old, or because they come from strange, dead cultures. It is horror because they feel so new. It is horror because they are not gone. They are the foundations of our own deepest, most modern anxieties. It is horror because deep down, we all know that same fear. The fear that our reality is just a word game in an empty void, that we are trapped in our own minds and can never truly know or be known. The fear that our one precious life is just a meaningless, material flicker between two infinite darknesses. The fear that we are screaming our prayers and our pain to a silent, indifferent, and empty heaven. The fear that our entire society, our civilization, is held together only by comforting lies that we are told for our own good. The fear that if those lies should fail, the only thing left to rule us is the brutal, iron hand of force. The fear that all our civility, our manners, our hygiene, and our shame is just a thin, fragile crust over the howling, amoral animal we refuse to see. And finally, the terrifying, cosmic fear that even if we fight and struggle and build and love and lose, it is all just fuel for the fire. The fear that there is no end, no peace, and no goal. The fear that the struggle is the only thing. The fear that the war is all there is. The real fear is not that these ancient philosophers were wrong. The fear is that 2,500 years later, we are all still desperately, and perhaps futilely, trying to prove that they were not right. If you made it this far, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.